Hi guys, so now that we have implemented our action as well as our reducer, let's quickly get and try to link everything together with the button as well as the value that comes and displays the number 0, which is our state that we had. So let me go back quickly and then let's go to our index.js file, which is the main, and we can also use the index.dispatch, but I have commented out. Similarly, because I've commented out, the increment number is not used, so you can see in the console that increment number will give you a problem. And in most cases, you will never need this file, of course, in your index.js, but this was just for demo purposes that we need the dispatch for. Okay, so I'll just enable it again, and I will also enable this to showcase that I can give in more dispatches. So let's say I have 3 dispatches in that scenario. It will be 1, 2, and 3. So it'll be fired 3 times. Okay, so that was about it. Now that being said, let's also remove the logo. So increment number as well as logo needs to be commented out because it's not being used. So let's go to app.js. Let's remove these 2 lines. So all the warnings should go away from your console. Now let's quickly tie the property, which is let's see how to use the store state into displaying the data that we have. So if I just display the number, let me show you. If I just display this get state and then showcase the value, okay, increment number is not there. Let's do that. So now that we have the number, you can see the state of the store is 1. However, this is still 0. So how can you make sure that the state is updated when you load this? Well, the way that we can do it is we can connect. So now that we have used store into our provider, what we can do is now, which also means that the store is available for our application and it should also be available for our number. But we do not have to code everything one by one into our children. What we can do is whichever component that you want the store to use, you need to go back to that component, in this scenario the number.js, and start implementing some code. Now I will tell you what that code is and what that code does, but what we are trying to do right now is using the store state and trying to link it to the properties of the component, which means you can start using them as a property, just like in case of React, where you have a parent and a child. You pass the properties or the data from the parent to the child as a props. Similarly, when you want to use a component in Redux, what you can do is you can just try to connect it with your store. The moment you do it, the items that are available in the state are available to you in your component as a props. So let's see how that can be done technically. So the first thing, if you recollect, that we had was we have to import connect. That was used to connect everything that was there from React Redux. So let's do that. Alright, the next step is, rather than exporting default class number directly from here, let's move back to the original version where we had export default number out here. So let's make sure that we export the number class at the bottom. So now let's implement the connect and let's try to connect the number component to the actual store. So you use the connect and then of course you wrap the number into brackets, and this will take 2 parameters. Now the first parameter will be used to connect the properties or the values that is there in the state, whereas the second property or the second parameter that will be used will be to map the functions that are available or the actions that are available to you. Let's see that. So let's quickly create a function. Let's call at map state to props. Okay, so that's our function that will of course give you the state, and now the state should be available to you in there. So let's do a console.log and just display the state onto the screen. Now just to know that where this is getting displayed from, let me just add something a little more to the comments so that we know that this is coming from number.js. Now that being said, let's put a comma on the console log and this should be ready for you. Now we have the function of map state to props, but it actually returns something. So let's just return an empty object for now because it has to return something. Now that we have our function, let's quickly try to connect it. So the first parameter will be your state to props, and the second parameter, let's leave it null for now. Null, the keyword null will signify that you do not have any other parameter passed. Let's save this, and once that saving is done, let's go back to our screen, and you can see out here map state to props will have an object of number, which means the state gets defined and the state can be used. So this is the state that we have. So what we can do here is we can use the number as a property and set it to state.num because that's the object that you get. So this is your state object that you have, which is number 1. Now let's try to see what the props will be, and let's go to the render. So let's try to display the props from our render function. So you can just do this dot props dot num, and again, of course, to distinguish it, let's try to put some comments here from the props. Okay, let's see what happens onto the screen, and you can see from the props you got the value of the number from your properties that were passed or that were fetched from the store and stored in your component. Now again, the state out here only has one small object as number. You can have your store to be as big as possible, and therefore your state can be more complex as much as possible. As this is a very small example, you can see that we only have one small variable so that we can play with it. Now that being said, we've already started with map state to props. Let's try to put this props to use. So rather than having a 0, let's try to use this props. So let's just save it, and now you should see 0 becomes 1 the moment you load, because you're automatically dispatching it. Now rather than doing a dispatch just by the load of it, let's try to connect the dispatch to the increment button. Now again, if you have to do any action in React, the way you do it is using onClick. So let's quickly see on how that can be done. So let's try to create another function map dispatch to props. So whatever actions are there can be dispatched using props. Again, this will take in a parameter of dispatch. So now that we have the function, let's see what we have to return from it. Now, just before we move ahead, let me tell you another important thing that we're going to import from our Redux. And it's very simple and very easy, and it's called bind action creators. Let me show it to you. So let's import bind action creators. Okay, and this will be imported from Redux. Now we will use this bind action creators out here. Now this bind action creators takes two parameters. One is of course an object, and two is the dispatch that we are talking about. So now these two arguments are present, but what will go in as the first parameter? Now, as the name suggests, if you see, it says bind action creators. What it does, it binds the actions together. Now, what actions are going to be bind together? Well, whatever actions you expose in that file. So the way you can, extract actions is you can import your action. In this scenario, if you go to the actions file, the only action we have is increment number. So you can go and you can say import increment number from actions. Now actions, again, you're in the components folder. To go to the actions folder, you need to do /actions. Okay, so that should give you the increment number. Now you can use this increment number action out here. So you have the map dispatch to props. That null that you have been saving position for is actually nothing but used to dispatch the actions to the properties. So you can just replace this out here, and when you save it, your action should also be available in your store. Now let's just remove this number from here, and let's see what the props hold from the props. So once you do that, you can see now the properties hold two things. Initially it was just the number 1, but now it is increment number as well, which is a function that we can use. So now you just by using this .props.increment number, you can actually make use of that action. And now that you can use, or you can make that function call using this .props.function name, what you can do now is you need to bind it to this button, and the way you can bind it to this button is using your onClick. So let's do that. So let's go here, and the increment button will have an onClick. It will take a value, so it has to be an ES6 function. Now the moment you do an onClick, this needs to call this .props.increment number. And what should be the number? Any guesses? Well, it has to be the same what is coming from your props. So this .props.number. Let's save it and let's see what happens on the screen. Nothing should happen. Let's quickly go ahead and comment out the dispatch action from our index.js. The reason we are going to be commenting it out, because now we are going to perform the action right from the UI on the screen. So now everything should be done, and now let's try to click it. As you can see, the number goes to 1, and see the steps that were performed. So first it went to the reducer. The number initially was 0. The moment it exits the reducer, the number becomes 1. And of course, when you map it to the properties, you have the number in your properties of the number.js file. Now, once you do that, you can definitely check the properties too. So that's how you can see how we tied our button and the action together so that the increments work. You can click as many times as you want and it'll increment. Now, as a exercise, I would say take a pause and see if you can implement the decrement option. So just the way you had a +1, all you need to do is do a -1. So here you have increment number. Let's try to see what you can do with decrement number. So again, you can use this as an opportunity to do an exercise. Try and fail. It's okay to fail, but give it a shot. But if you cannot do it, don't worry. You can just play the next video. And again, as usual, if you have any questions, do make sure to ask me in the Q&A section or in the comments below. I'll be super happy to help you. I'll see you in the next class.